Okay, welcome to week 4. We're continuing pretty much a lot of the same kind of topics of discussion, and hopefully you'll see some overlap with what we've done in the previous 3 weeks. This kind of brings it to a little bit of a conclusion, at least an initial conclusion, and it'll be a little bit of a denser, probably maybe more difficult reading. The author is pulling in a lot of different things and he's trying to tease out a kind of complicated set of notions, but I think if you go slowly it should make sense. I'm going to walk through it and sort of highlight some things I think are centrally important and then expand on that a little bit for the lecture for today. Okay, so the first thing is just to talk about the title, The Liturgy of Theory. And that's an odd title because liturgy is often associated with religious practice. So liturgy is like liturgical practices are done for a mass or a service. You know that when there's in a Catholic mass, parts of the mass are called like the liturgy of the word is when the scripture is read. The liturgy of the Eucharist is when the ritual of the Eucharist is carried out. So it's connected to religion and religious services. That's actually very important to bear in mind immediately from the beginning for 2 really key reasons. One of which is a liturgy is something that you perform. It's an action. It's something that you do. So like there's liturgical practices. But secondly, liturgy is obviously, as I just said, connected with religion and a sense of worship, a sense of attending to God, paying attention to God, etc., contemplating the divine, as it were. What Dustin, the author of the article, is trying to get us to think about immediately and right from the beginning is that theory, and theory as he's going to understand it in a much more profound and insightful way, is something that is both practiced and is practical and is also something that has this sort of religious connotation to it to some extent. Okay, so it's really important to kind of, the liturgy of theory, got to keep that in mind. Okay, now immediately in the article, he's going to take up the issue of the fact that we often separate out theory and practice, right? So something is seen as theoretical when it's an abstract idea. It's you're sitting around dialoguing about something that's removed from your immediate scope of activity. You can present all sorts of notions. They seem to work in theory. The theory is okay, but they may not have any practical benefit. They may not be something that you can put into practice. They may not reflect how we practically live our lives. So there's a common distinction between theory and practice. Theory seems to be something that we do only in our heads. Practice is what we actually live out in our daily lives. So it's like the difference between somebody saying, well, in my mind, I was this sort of person, but in their everyday life, they were a different sort of person. So there's theory and practice seem to be quite distinct at that point. And insofar as something like contemplation or wonder, contemplation we've always been talking a lot about, seems to be more theoretical, right? It seems to be something where you're pondering things at a deep level. You're reflecting on it in a certain way, you're forming ideas, you're asking certain sorts of questions, you're attending to things in a particular manner. It doesn't seem like you're doing anything. It doesn't seem like you're actually engaging in a lot of activity. It seems kind of a waste of time. I think Pieper at points calls it useless, etc. So there's a tension. It's like, well, there's this theory and there's practice, and they don't really seem to kind of go together. And if somebody said, well, what's the practical benefit? What's the practical payoff? How is this going to be of practical utility? It seems like theoretical things like contemplation just aren't going to fit in with that. And you're like, well, that might be a bit of a problem. What's this all about, etc. So that's this tension right from the beginning, right? That's what he's kind of wrestling with. What we're going to see with Dustin, though, is that in the author of this essay is that he thinks that this differentiation, this distinction between theory and practice that we commonly hold on to, that we're often have in mind, is not actually a real and meaningful distinction in the end. And that if we actually think into it more deeply, we recognize that theory and practice often do in fact go together. It should in fact go together, and that there's a continuity between the two. So he's acknowledging the normal distinction, but saying in the end what he wants to show is that it doesn't work, and that theory is actually a practice, especially the more we understand what theory is about. And that's a sort of practice that's a liturgy, that kind of practice. Okay, so bottom of the first page of this essay, which I guess we did page 257 because it's taken from a collection of essays. He's going to start talking about how this notion that contemplation brings us to the depth of things. I'm going to again bring up that quote I brought up from Gerard Manley Hopkins. It's attending to the dearest freshness deep down things. And that kind of attention, that way of being attuned to, drawn into, and caught up in, where you're recognizing like the deep meaning of things, the deep beauty that's there, the deep goodness that's there, which is often hidden from our normal experience, which we often disregard or gloss over, it's not on our radar, where we're kind of struck by that. We're asking questions into it, we're inquiring into it, we're pondering it, we're being drawn into wonder about it, etc. That, he thinks, is central to what the whole practice of contemplation is about. And then he's going to get into the notion, of course, we've talked about this, that contemplation is a seeing, right? That when somebody is deeply contemplating in this way, they're seeing the world around them in a deeper lens, from a deeper perspective. They're seeing it in an open, receptive manner. Okay, they're seeing things not in terms of imposing quick categorizations on them, not in terms of merely how is this thing useful, not in terms of how is this thing in my way, or there's a beholding that pays attention, that's patient, that's that long, loving look at the real, right? That was the title of one of the essays we read in week 2. So you're taking that time and you're doing it caring, out of care, and doing it carefully in a way where the mystery, depth, meaning, and beauty of the world can start to come to appearance for you, can start to be there for you, can start to strike you, can stand in front of you in a very marked and intensified way. It can be there that you see it maybe for the first time. It's sort of, there's an honoring of the thing that you're seeing, and a beholding it in a way where you're reverent toward it. You don't take it lightly. You don't take it in a shallow manner. You don't just try to. It's a long, loving look, right? It's a look that's caring and careful. It's done out of affection. It's done in a way where you're drawn to appreciate and value the thing all the more as you gaze upon it contemplatively. So what he then, the essay saying, okay, when we're thinking about theory, it's going to be talking in sense about contemplation, especially in terms of its connection with seeing. And seeing does seem to be very important here. It's kind of paying attention to the depth of the world. And then one of the block quotes on 258, he's quoting this woman, Christine Schroeder-Schecker, who talks about how monks in the Middle Ages, one of their central aspects of their way of life was to try to see God in all things. So their way of encountering the world was not so much to just see it as a thing distinct from God, see it as like just matter or physical stuff or anything like that, but to see it as in some ways a mirror that pointed back to the God from who made it, or that made manifest and expressed, and you could say even revealed some of the beauty, depth, and wonder of God. So that this way of seeing in this respect was not for the satisfaction of curiosity, but it was a process of wonder that was oriented toward the possibility of bringing monks into a deeper relationship with and encounter of God. And that sort of helps set this stage for us, right? We're thinking this is not seeing as we commonly understood it as sort of a surface level, shallow thing where it's merely light hitting my eyes. No, it's seeing in depth. And again, one immediate example that we can think about is the expression when somebody says about a significant other, he or she really sees me, right? They see me and they value me. They're not seeing this aspect of me. They're not seeing this surface level of me. They're not seeing me in merely one or in this in terms of me being an athlete or me being a student or me being from this town or that. No, they see who I am. And they attend to that, and they appreciate that, and I am very. It's an intense, unitive kind of experience to see someone in that way, and we're all. I think we have some understanding of what that's like and how important that is and significant it is. That's the kind of seeing that this essay is starting to get us to think about. Okay. So then 258 on to 259, he's going to start talking about the need to go back to practices and understandings and ways of seeing and being theoretical that were done in earlier times. And he calls this, a recalling, where you bring back to mind what was done in the past. We have the term recollection. So you bring to mind something that was going on in the past in a way that it might impact and influence what you do here and now in the present. And the thing that he wants to recall and kind of bring back to mind and bring back to what we can do here and now is this original sense of theory, this original way of understanding theory, etc. So it's not going back merely to shed light on what happened in the past. It's to shed light on it to say, what does theory actually look like? What was the original sense and meaning of it? So that we might be able to have that in mind as we come to try to understand and live out theory in the proper, deep, and most meaningful way. So, it's all, one example that I was just thinking about would be how sometimes in a marriage, people have to go back and consider the vows that they made. And they have to keep those vows in mind. They have to recall them. There has to be a recollection of them. And that informs them on a deep and meaningful level of who they are and who they are called to be in that marriage. So they bring those things to light and thus to mind, not as a nice memory, but as an impactful understanding that can direct and inform how they live out their marriage here and now. And that is meant to be an analogy with what Dustin is trying to do in this article, trying to bring back to light and bring back to mind this original meaning and sense of theory so it can be lived out best now. All right, so the next section is called theoria or theoria, if we're going to really use the Greek. So theoria is the Greek term from which obviously we get our English term theory. Dustin goes on a little bit of a what we might call etymological analysis here. He's looking at the roots of the word. What did it originally mean? What did it look like in the ancient Greek world? And he said, well, it connected to the term spectate, or a spectator, like a spectator at a musical performance, or a spectator at a theater performance or an athletic performance. He said, but even beyond that, it meant a spectator at a religious ritual, somebody who was there not merely to watch, but to take part in. So somebody who was actually performing some of the prayers, performing some of the activities that were part of the thing that he was also simultaneously spectating. So it's not like our normal understanding of the word spectated, where you're just the athletes or the musicians are doing the main thing and you're removed from that and you're not really involved. It's much more about somebody going to, say, a ceremony where there's going to be prayers to the gods in ancient Greece, and other things associated with that. And you watch some of that, but you also take part in it. So there's an active role that the spectator, in the sense of theoria, was carrying out in the original Greek understanding of this. So that's obviously a big part of it, but again, it's connected, as he's going to point out here on 259 over on 260, that like this had a religious connotation. So the term theoria is also connected perhaps to the term theos, which is the Greek term for God. Hence, when we have the term like theology, it means the study of God. And he thinks that there's, he's kind of controversial in this, but he thinks there's a linguistic connection between theoria and theos. And so to spectate in the theoretical way that he's describing is also, in some respects, to participate in a ritual that helps you to be drawn closer to God and to see the divine more clearly. And one of the immediate things that we're starting to see with all of this, of course, is the notion that he's talked about from the beginning, which is somebody who's engaged with theory in this respect of theoria is doing things, right? They're going to the ceremony. They're attending to what's happening. They're prayerfully responding. They're performing the ritual. So it's not as if, there's a practical lived element that's happening when they're engaged with the theory. The theory is not merely an abstract thing that they're postulating, removed from and distinct from their life. It's not irrelevant. It's actually they're putting theoria into practice in that respect. And so there's a, how do I say this better? Yeah, I mean, if you think about somebody going to a church service or to a mass or something of that sort, where they're following along with what's happening in the service of the mass, they're offering prayers, they're participating in it, and you wouldn't say that they're not like vegging out, right? They're not just sitting there and like letting everything happen. They're performing functions or enacting roles that are part of the ritual performance. And for Dustin, the author of the essay, he's saying that's reminiscent of what's going on in the original meaning of theoria. It's an engaged process of spectating. It's one where you're performing this activity of theoria in the right way so that you can more properly attune to and encounter the divine all around you. Of course, this also is a process of being moved to wonder, And he's going to talk about that on bottom of page 260. So there's a way of being open to a mystery, attending to something that strikes us, that moves us to question, that we don't have ready answers to, that seems greater than us and transcendent of us, that invites us to know it more deeply and to enter into a deeper encounter with it. And again, the quote from, there's a quote from Martin Heidegger who talks about this as a reverent paying heed. So you reverently, there's a sense of being humble before this. Pay heed. You're deeply attending to something. You're stretching your mind toward it. You're stretching your heart toward it. That long, loving look at the real. But this is not, and you're letting your movement of the heart toward wonder take over. But one of the main things, again, to bear in mind as we finish up that section, is that the theoria, in this original Greek sense of the term from which we get our English word theory, theoria, thus understood, is practiced. It's lived out. It's something that we act out. And it's a performance to this degree. So that's immediately starting to get us thinking about the connection between theory and practice, that they're not as distinct and differentiated. And as we often think in a kind of shallow way, there's actually starting to become clear that there's a deep interconnection between the two. Okay, so then the next thing he's going to get into is this discussion on techne. And here it is a little bit complicated. So I'm going to go through this slowly, try to help articulate what he's trying to say. Techne, again, ancient Greek term. It's obviously the term from which we get our English word technology. But you have to immediately think of it, techne as a little bit different from technology. In its original meaning, techne meant art, skill, or craft, right? So, if you think about, here's an example, maybe like a farmer's market, you've seen people who present their own artwork, who present paintings. Sometimes people will present pottery. Those are people who would be practicing and living out a certain heightened degree of techne. They have that art, or they're able to practice that craft, and they're able to do it well. All right, somebody who can make homemade clothing very well today, we would say that person has that techne skill. Somebody who is very good at, what would be another example of this? Anyway, the people at sort of the farmer's market, I'm blanking on another example, but the farmer's market thing might be an initial way to think into this. So it's a skill that's ingrained. It's a skill it's a skill that's part of somebody's practice. It's something that somebody has learned and they can put into practice easily, readily, and well. They can make very finely made things. Okay, so if you think about that term, like something that's finely made, it's attractive. You can see the quality of the workmanship. You can see the quality of the craftsmanship. You can see how much effort and skill had to be put into practice in order for this to come about. It's not like something that's manufactured. It's not like something that's made at a factory. It's not like something that's mass produced. There's a particular kind of quality to it. Again, people who do like woodworking and they make cabinets or chairs. If you've ever seen that, that's another example of this kind of profound techne, skill, art, or craft that is something where people have the ability to make things well, and then the finished product is very finely made, and people are really willing to pay a lot of money for it precisely because there is so much skill involved in its production and because it's so finely made. Yeah, I think to some degree, actually, if you can kind of think about somebody who's really skilled, who maybe sells stuff, either at a farmer's market or online, and it's like, whether it be furniture, whether it be art, etc., some homemade goods, etc., where you're like pottery, again, being another example. I'm just thinking of mug that I have, pottery mug I bought recently at a farmer's market. It's like it's handcrafted, it's really well done. And that's an example of techne, I think. Now, just to kind of, so that's getting us thinking about techne to some degree, but what did it mean in the original Greek sense? Because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to recall that. So you think about a craftsman, somebody who has a lot of skill in this way. One of the immediate things that Dustin says is going on here is this person is actually bringing to light or revealing a divine order of things, okay? And there's the term he's going to start talking about at the bottom of page 261 is cosmos. Now, you probably have seen that term. Sometimes it means the universe, but in the original Greek understanding, cosmos meant like an ordered, harmonious structure to the entire world, a pattern that was there and operative, even if often invisible and something that we did not really know, but we were caught up in. And for the ancient, and I think we should just sit with this for a little bit, because there are ordered patterns to the seasons, and the Greeks were very attentive to that. There's 4 different seasons that have 4 different kind of patterns to them. That there's a rhythmic pattern to a day, to a week, to a month, and to a year. There's a pattern to the fact that the Earth is a certain distance from the sun and has a revolution around it and rotates on its axis. There's sort of pattern, in the Greek understanding of cosmos, they would also probably look at sort of the patterned existence of natural things, how things tend to grow, develop, how animals tend to move around. The one way of thinking about this is when you look at somebody looking at the universe and says, wow, things work very well, there seems to be a lot of structure to this. Why is that the case? So here's an analogy that I was just kind of thinking about. Like when you walk into somebody's house, you notice that things are often in an accessible place. It's easy to navigate. It's easy to figure out where things are. It's well ordered in that respect. There's not a lot of wasted space. It's very comfortable in that regard. You can make use of things readily. It's available. And there's a sense of it just not chaotic. It's not random. It's not messy. That's a well-ordered, well-structured home to some degree. The Greeks had a sense of the universe as being akin to that on a grander, larger scale, as being something like a well-structured, well-ordered home that everything inhabits and everything lives in. So that's the first thing I want to bring out. But the next thing, it's a little hard to discuss this, but it's the fact that structure or order, we can see the visible, like if you go into a home, you can see the visible manifestation of it. You feel it to some extent. But what does structure or order, it's actually kind of you see things being put in the right order or being well structured or being done harmoniously. But harmony, structure, and order, this is one of Dustin's points here, they're actually, on a fundamental level, mental, invisible realities. We see the manifestation of them when things are existing harmoniously, but the actual meaning and depth of harmony is not a visible thing. It's not a tangible thing. All right, so let's start to think about this in some other ways. So we can think about the term ratio. That's also helpful here, I think, to some degree. So the ratio of, say, 6 to 12 is the same as the ratio of 3 to 6, right? It's the ratio of one thing to, it's the ratio of one thing to a second thing that's twice the amount of it, twice the number of it. So 3 is to 6 as 6 is to 12. Very basic, very easy to follow, right? But there's a more difficult point, and it's hard to tease this out, but just pause for a moment and think about the meaning and significance of ratio. What is ratio? What is ratio like? Not number, not 6 things, not 12 things or 3 things, but ratio. All right. You wouldn't find ratio in a room. You won't find a ratio out in the world, as it were. Ratio seems to be the sort of reality that is not visible. It comes to presence, we notice it when visible things are in proper ratio with each other. But ratio itself and as such is not one of those things. Or just think about harmony, right? That when you hear music that's where the instruments are in good working order with each other, we might say they're in harmony with each other. In that instance, you can hear the harmonious interconnection and working together of the instruments, and it's quite beautiful and it's lovely. But harmony comes to audio presence there. It comes to presence in a way where we can hear it. But harmony itself, the meaning of it, the being of it, as it were, is not a thing among things. It's something that comes to manifestation. We can notice it. We can attend to it as it's being acted out. But in and of itself, it's a non-visible reality that's not accessible. And I know this is super complicated and abstract, and I would imagine at this point, if we were having this in class, a lot of people would be like, what the heck are you saying? A final example I can give, it's a little bit different, but it's helpful, is if you can think about the meaning of a word and how meaning, like just think about the word life or the word, and any kind of word that you can think of, even think about the meaning of the word word. I'll just go with life, came to mind. The meaning of that word is not a visible thing. We know what it means. We know when it's used meaningfully. We know when it's not used meaningfully. we grasp that meaning, but the meaning is not contained in the visible or words that we see on paper or the auditory words that we hear, or even in the sign language or anything like that. The meaning of it is of a whole different order. It's a whole different way of existing. And that's analogous to what Dustin is talking about here in terms of cosmos. The deep order, harmony, structure of the universe. Another word here is not in itself visible. And just as the meaning of the word life comes to presence when that word is actually written out and it's seen and heard, likewise, a deep structure and order, a cosmos of the universe comes to visual presence when something is well made in a techne sense of it. All right, I know that was long, but I had to go a lot in depth so that that could come out and some could be known a little bit more clearly. And so when somebody makes something beautiful or something finely made in that respect, for the ancient Greeks, that person with that techne was bringing out and bringing to light a deep order beauty of the cosmos. Something about the harmony and the structure of the universe at a very profound level, at a level where it in of itself was invisible, that now becomes visible in and by means of the craftsmanship being carried out by the person with techne. So the making visible, the making real, the bringing to presence, that's central to what's happening with this skilled craftsmanship being carried out. Now it's even more complicated in some sense than that. One of the things that he wants to point out here is that, first of all, the person with genuine techne is not imposing his own order or harmony or sense of things. He's rather attending to that at some intuitive, deep level. He's seeing that in some way and being inspired by it and led by it and guided by it. And that same inspiration is leading him or her to make their particular art or thing that they make. And when that thing is made, it itself manifests the same beauty, harmony, or order that was the inspiration for the artist, the craftsman in the first place. So let's look at this from the perspective of draw or painting. So an artist in this respect might see something beautiful in the natural world and is really struck by it, and they attend to it, and it moves and inspires them in this respect. And that's what moves and inspires them to paint the particular painting that they do. So they've seen this beauty, and then they, as a result of the inspiration from that seen beauty, or that seen harmony, as it were, they put it in, they then render a painting which is a reflection of that same beauty. And for those who then look at that painting or gaze upon that painting, behold that painting, they're able to see also some of that same beauty, which often would be hidden from their experience and not something that they would attend to. So there's both, so the artist, the craftsman with the techne sees beauty and helps make it visible for others to also attend to. Okay, hopefully that's becoming a little bit more clear. Okay. Another thing he's going to start talking about on the bottom of 262 and then on to 263 to some extent is also he talks about dance. So it's not, and you can think about this in the sense of somebody who's actually like, not only in terms of what they make, but their very activity in the dance itself is helping, insofar as it's harmonious and beautiful, is bringing to light that same sense of harmony and beauty. So it's not that it's the finished craft or the finished product that itself is the focal point of beauty, but it's the actual lived and acted performance, which is beautiful and harmonious in itself. So when the dancers are doing their performance in the right way, and there's this amazing harmony and rhythmic beauty to it, and we're drawn to attend to it, that activity itself, that performance itself that they're doing, regardless of any finished product, that activity itself is a harmonious, beautiful thing that, in Dustin's term, kind of reveals or brings to light the deep structure and beauty of the cosmos. So the movement and the pattern and the rhythm, regardless of any finished product in this case, is also something that demonstrates this deep beauty. He talks about a ship as an example of this on page 263. A ship that is harmonious both in its parts, it works together well, it's well structured, the proper ratio, but it's also harmonious with the water, so it can float well on it, it can withstand the storms that might be happening on the sea, etc. And so there's something finely made about that, but the finely made fact of it, as I was saying earlier, it also brings to light this deeper cosmological harmony. That's again, it's a strange idea. It's often invisible, but now we have a glimpse into it. Another analogy might be like saying, we talk about the eyes as the window to the soul, right? So the soul being this deepest, most essential aspect of who we are as persons. And sometimes when we look deeply into the eyes of another person, there's a revelation of who that person is at their depth. And without that encounter with an experience of the person's eyes in that respect, we wouldn't get that glimpse into their soul. And so to phrase it in these terms, it's almost, I think, what Dustin is saying for the ancient Greeks. When a craftsman performs and makes something beautiful, harmonious, and well ordered, what he or she is doing is bringing to light the soul of the universe. It's a weird analogy, but just play with it, man. It's like they're acting as the eyes that help other people see into the soul of the universe, which is otherwise hidden, veiled, and inaccessible. So he's, in one respect, there's almost like there's a divinely ordered and deeply essential nature to the craftsman here. They help us witness and be moved by the profound beauty of things, the profound harmony of the universe, the soul of the world, as it were, which otherwise we wouldn't really have a lot of contact with. Okay. Bottom of 263, he's going to continue on this notion of the craft that is he uses this weird expression, it's giving birth, but what it's sort of, the creativity of the artist when he or she is doing this is also kind of bringing to light the creative energy that is at root of and foundational to the very process of life itself. So again, they're kind of tapping into that. They're expressing that. they're showing what that creativity is like in real time in front of us, the same creative energy and creative force that's moving the entire universe. Another way to think about this, there's a quote from the Italian poet Dante, who at the end of his epic masterpiece, The Divine Comedy, says, he talks about love as the force that moves the sun and the other stars. So for him, love was this creative energy that was the root, foundation, and basis of everything. If we're thinking about this in terms of the discussion today, we would say that when somebody does a creative act of love, like they're creative in how they express love to another person, and they think outside the box and they do something that's kind of novel, new, and unanticipated in terms of expressing love. Not only is it a loving and good deed, it also and simultaneously helps to bring to light and to bring to presence, at least for the moment, a sense of that same creative energy of love that is foundational to the very structure and meaning of the universe itself. So that's another analogy to kind of play with here. The final takeaway of this is just to say that, like, the artist, the craftsman, is a prime example, a paradigm, a leading exemplar of the person who, in her actions and in what she makes, helps to taps into and helps to bring to expression a divine order, a cosmos, the depth and meaning of the universe in a particular way. Another analogy, I don't want to use too many, but maybe this one will also help, is we can think about, there's a phrase, some people talk about Mozart and Beethoven as if they tapped into the music of the heavens. Something about their music brought out and brought to light what seemed to be like a divinely inspired beauty that had a heavenly origin. Now that's a bit of a metaphor. That's fine, because what we're trying to get at is that those artists such as Beethoven and Mozart, I also say Bach, certainly too, Vivaldi, they helped us sort of have a glimpse into and an image of perhaps a divine beauty that's at the root and foundation of everything. Okay. What we're starting to see now, we're going to page 264, is the kind of bringing this together. That first and foremost, theory, understood as theoria, is a practice. It's a practice that has to be lived out. It's a practice that has to be done well. It's practice in the sense, first of all, that you have to train yourself to do it, right? We've talked about this. You can't just, our normal way of seeing is quick. It's surface level. It's glib. It's you go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. This has to be a practice that we put in, that we practice over and over again, so we develop the skill or the techne of it. It can't be done readily. It has to be performed over and over again, so it becomes ingrained, it becomes habitual, it becomes just a way of doing things. Obviously, for those of you who are athletes, that should be easily understandable, because it's the same thing you do literally when you go to practice to get better at your sport and to have the techne or skill of it become more deeply ingrained, so that you can perform it at a higher level and a more successful level. So that's the first sense of practice that he's starting to bring up. The second sense of practice that he's starting to bring up, though, is also the sense of practice as something that's performed over and over again. So we talk about like a doctor's practice or a lawyer's practice. Not only do they have a skill that they've developed over time by practicing it and becoming very good at it and having it as an ingrained aspect of who they are, it's also something they live out and enact as their way of life. And so that's what Dustin is starting to get us to think about, that we have to put this theoria into practice in the manner as would be done by somebody with techne. Because that's the first thing he's going to try to talk about, to connect practice, theory, and techne all together. So just as the skilled artist or craftsman refined his skill over time by practice and then put it into practice and lived it out, the person who practices theoria as the deep attending to, the participatory, spectating, the wondering attention to the dearest freshness, deep down things, that person has to A, develop that skill or techne over time, and B, live it out continuously and make it a way of life. So then he's going to start talking about the doing and the activity of the techne. And, you know, again, the very activity, for example, of making music, I talked about this with dance, is itself something that helps bring to light and bring out something beautiful. So watching the performance itself, seeing the harmony or hearing the harmony, seeing and hearing the harmony come together itself is a revelation of, or an indication of, or a manifestation of a deeper harmony that's at the root and core of reality. It's almost providing a window into that. So the eyes is the window of the soul metaphor. The soul of the universe is coming out through the eyes of the musical performance, through the eyes of the highly skilled activity, which helps to reveal that. Another thing he's saying, he's kind of reiterating a point made earlier, is that when this happens, the person is not inventing an order, not imposing an order, they're tapping into it. They're feeling it, they're intuiting it, they're participating in it. So they're drawing out something that's already there and making it present. Again, the artist who sees the beautiful sunset is not inventing beauty. She's not making up beauty. She's not just saying, well, this is what I feel is beauty. She's responding to a beauty that's already there, albeit often implicit and off radar. And in that response and being inspired by it, she's led to make a painting which further reflects in a finely made fashion that same beauty. And so her performance of the drawing of the painting as well as the finished painting are both reflections of and manifestations of the same beauty that inspired her in the first place. Another thing that he's going to start talking about here on 265 is that as somebody starts to, say, practice music well, they become a musical sort of person. It's part and parcel of their soul, we might say. It's deeply ingrained to who and what they are. They have made themselves into a musical person through this effort and through this work. The regularity and ritual of their practice and performance has made them into a particular type of person. So it's not just something they do, it becomes something they are, if you can see that distinction. And they find themselves sort of participating again in the order and structure of the universe and bringing it to particular manifestation in and through their music. So they're kind of caught up in and tap into this music of the spheres, this harmony, this beauty of the world all around them, which they help to bring about in their own particular manner through their way of being musical. Just as the artist, the painter does the same thing with her art. She becomes artistic in her soul. She becomes, there's a beauty of her soul which is resonant with and connected to the beauty that she sees. And the more she attends to that beauty and is caught up in it, the more beautiful her soul becomes, because it reflects the same beauty that inspires her, and which she helps to bring to manifestation and revelation for those around her. So the person who participates in this techne and this attending to beauty and harmony and order becomes more harmonious, beautiful, and ordered in their own soul. So just as they're making something beautiful, they're also forming themselves into be more beautiful people at their soul level at the same time. So then on 266, he's going to start talking about how the attunement to beauty, this contemplative seeing, is like a liturgy. It's an activity done which lines us up ultimately with the divine. It's that way of seeing. It's a practice developed over time, done attentively, by means of which we start to tap into and have connection with and participate in the depth of beauty and meaning and harmony in the universe, where we're attuning to that, we're drawn into it, as it were. And in this respect, we help to bring it to presence, right? It becomes visible for us. But as we're doing so, it's like the craftsman in that sense. But as we're doing so, what also is taking place is that we ourselves are formed into particular sorts of beings as a result of this process. Insofar as we are practicing this skill to be good at it, and then putting it into practice over and over again and making it a way of life for ourselves, we are, first of all, attending to and helping to bring about the revelation of this deeper, formed and changed and transformed as a result of it. So it's like a liturgical performance, because it's a activity that brings us more deeply into connection with the divine. It's not done in an abstract manner. It's not removed from daily life. It's sort of the essence of who we are. It changes us from the inside outward. And it's a process by means of which the kind of hidden cosmos or hidden divine order becomes more and more manifest to us, but also manifest in our souls, which correspond to that same order. So just as the artist became more beautiful in seeing and responding to the beauty around her, the person who practices theory as a liturgy becomes not only more attentive to the divine order, but more himself, and his soul becomes reflective of that, becomes better in his soul, precisely because he's so caught up in that same order. One term that I'm going to use here, it's a little bit weird, but I think it's helpful, is this term epiphanic activity. You're like, what the heck does that mean? Well, an epiphany is a revelation. right? Epiphany is something that strikes us. It's a revelation that we didn't anticipate that comes about, and it moves us in our hearts. All right. So the Feast of the Epiphany in Catholicism and Christianity means like the coming to presence of God as a human person in the person of Jesus Christ. So it's a revelation of the divine in a manner that is unanticipated, unforeseen, striking, and almost overwhelming. What Dustin is trying to get at is this sense that the practice of theory is an activity which, when done well, properly, and deeply, has an epiphanic quality to it. It helps us attune to a revelation of the divine order, of the dearest freshness, deep down things, of the ultimate structure of the cosmos. It enables us to get caught up in that and be moved by it in ways that we can never anticipate. It's like the artist who sees the beauty of the sunset or the mountains or whatever, that deeply moves her, where she feels herself seeing something almost heavenly, and the activity of her art is a way of helping that become brought to greater visible presence. And in a similar way, Dustin is saying that when somebody practices theory or contemplation in this liturgical manner, that very activity helps them have revealed to them something of the divine. So there's that epiphany that occurs in and by means of their practice of theory in that respect. So then he ends by talking about some practical implications of this, that, it's a techne, it's a skillful seeing. It's a practice that has to be done over and over again. It's a way of being drawn into wonder. And, he talks about the person who does this theoria was a spectator and a participant. So you're actively doing something that enables you to see more deeply and be moved more profoundly by the divine order, the harmony, and the cosmos of the universe. It's a practice of facilitating and letting flow a deeper sense of wonder that enables an encounter with the mystery. And it allows for that order to be revealed because we become more attuned to it and receptive to that revelation. He finally is going to talk to us about how it's also a practice, an artful practice. It has to be done artfully and skillfully. It has to be done gracefully. And it's a process of education. It takes time, and it helps to transform the person who's doing it. The final thing he's going to say, and I think this is a good way to end it, is that when there's this process of being drawn into this divine order, this deep sense of the cosmos, this beauty, this profound goodness, this dearest freshness, deep down things, what it does is it resonates in our soul. It activates something in our soul. It moves our soul. Okay, so for Plato, education was a process of moving the soul toward a deep attending to the true and the good and the beautiful. And Dustin in this essay is picking up on that. And he's saying that when we are caught up in and attentive to what's truly good and beautiful, when we are practicing a way of life that draws us to a more intensified and receptive contemplation of those things, when that becomes part and parcel of how we put this into practice, it has the possibility of forming and transforming our souls in such a way that they mirror that. So our souls become better and more beautiful insofar as they're more attentive to and caught up in the contemplation of what is deeply beautiful and deeply good. we mirror that which we attend to. We are a reflection of that same beauty and same goodness, the more we are drawn into wonder and contemplation of it. Okay, so I think I'll end with that. Again, this is a tough reading. I understand that. It's important to go slowly. It's important to take your time with it. I think you'll find it, especially in light of hopefully what I said, that it connects with what we've talked about. And the final thing I would say is, the more you have instances of experiencing something of this sort, the more it will actually begin to be clear. Because it's really hard. You have to kind of connect it to your own life to some degree, or else it's just going to be bizarre and abstract and incomprehensible. But thinking about it in terms of what you've done and what you've lived out, and occasions where that has come to examples from your own life, I think that's going to help set the stage for seeing what he's getting at, and in a way that resonates with you and maybe deepens your own sense of your own experience. So you're not trying to get an abstract understanding of something that you can memorize. You're trying to see how what Dustin in this essay is saying actually connects with and helps reflect your own experience in a way that maybe deepens it toward the possibility of being drawn into wonder to a reality that's always there. Okay, so that's that for this week, and I'll see, and hope you guys enjoy the reading and the video.